Welcome to Software Sundays Builders. This is a space where we share real conversations about technology and how you can help lead some of that transformation happening inside of your community. So, if this is your first time tuning in, it is great to have you. You are definitely in the right place. And if you've been rocking with us for a minute, it's good to have you back. Let's keep it going. So, before we jump in, a few quick announcements. Do want to say happy birthday to my uncle Darrell. He is turning 34 tomorrow. I hope you are feeling lovely. I hope you're feeling youthful. I hope you're feeling great and getting all of your, getting your life where it needs to go for yourself. I say that because, as we all age and things, I am hoping that we're aging the way that we want to be developing. So I hope all of that is going well for you and that you are able to look at your life and just, smile, be at peace and, confident in what you're doing and how you are going to keep doing what you're doing. So I love you. Happy birthday again. And enjoy. And also, it is my baby cousin, Malia Johnson's third birthday. I ain't have to put a whole government, but happy birthday, Malia. I hope you are loving your life. I hope you are having a lot of fun. And I hope you are taking care of your parents and not driving them too crazy. So enjoy your birthday also. I think her birthday is it's later in the week, maybe Thursday or Friday. I'm not exactly sure, but I will definitely check in then. And is it Aquarius season now still? I think so. The seasons always get me. I'm gonna be honest. They change so quickly. Like it's like the months, but they not even accurate to like on the month. So it be getting me. If it gets you, I would understand, yeah. It's also St. Patrick's Day. One of these days coming up. So all my can I say Iries? I hope all my Iries are that might be a whole different group, but I hope all of y'all are enjoying the day. I actually want somebody to send me what the origins of St. Patrick's Day is. I know it's about the Irish. I know there's the four-leaf clover in a lot of the decorations for St. Patrick's Day, but I really don't know the background and history for that holiday. So if you know it, if you know how it started, why we're doing it in the US versus it just being some type of Irish holiday, definitely put that in the chat. Let me know and enlighten your boy. You feel me? And it's Eid al Fitr, Fitr. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But I think that's the end of the fasting for all of our Muslim brothers and sisters. So I hope this uh, recent fast has been enlightening to you. I hope that you are still keeping your strength. I hope you found some knowledge, some peace, and the fasting that you've done allows you really to reflect on the greatness that is inside of you and in God, uh, him or herself. And also want to FYI, there will be no Software Sundays episode next week and maybe not the week after. I'm going on a vacation with my wife. That's why I have the uniform on right now, so you know. But I'm gonna be out in the Caribbean enjoying my time, not thinking too much about tech at all, and just living my life on the beach, in the sand, and maybe in some water. So uh, I will see you all back by April, definitely, or by the end of the March, end of the March, end of the month, uh, maybe. We'll see. And that we can pretty much get started. You know how we do. Quick disclaimer: Software Sundays is for informational purposes only. This is not professional advice. You may hear some topics or and views that may or may not impact your business directly, uh, or may not apply to your specific business situation. If you are looking for advice, consult your own legal, business, tax, or other advisor before making any decisions based upon information found in this show. Software Sundays is my own views, and it may not reflect the views of Build, Learn, Impact or their affiliates. So keep that in mind. So a lot of good information to get into this week. First, Meta is reportedly delaying the launch of their new AI model because it is just not giving enough. Basically, they have tested it internally and decided that it's not really competitive against some of the other models coming out of Google and OpenAI and even Anthropic. So it's not really worth putting out as a competitor to those technologies, especially when it's not doing as well in reasoning, coding, or even writing tasks. So the company is actually going to be pushing the launch until at least May, until they can make it better and improve its results. Part of that decision is also Meta, or it also has Meta leaders considering using Gemini models to power their products, which is very interesting. The most interesting part about that is the model that they did not consider as a uh or qualificate or uh what would be the word? Uh the models that they didn't consider basically. If they're going with Gemini, that would be the second of the magnificent seven that are going with Google as their intelligence provider of choice. We talked a few months ago or a few weeks ago about Apple choosing to move away from OpenAI to using Google Gemini to power Siri. If we start seeing that pattern continue, it's looking like one, Gemini models are, you know, showing up better to the market and these players as the better alternative to them building something on their own, and also even using OpenAI, which is the first originator of AI, right? So in ChatGPT. So it definitely is interesting. It says a lot about two things. It could be that people are just not vibing well with Sam Altman and OpenAI, and that they're just choosing to avoid using their technology. Or it could be that OpenAI is really not keeping up with the competitiveness of the industry. It really has been talked about a lot online that Gemini is the better model for coding and a number of other tasks, especially with them having access to the web so readily with their search products. So it makes sense that they are doing better in that space. One of the challenges with any of these companies continuing to develop AI models and frontier foundational models is that we've gotten past the point where adding more compute, adding more data, and adding more powerful GPUs is making a significant difference between the different competitors. At this point, you need to start improving and optimizing the algorithms that are used to build these models. And unless you're doing that, you're not going to see any significant differences between the Gemini model versus the Claude model versus ChatGPT and these other models in the space. And for those types of advancements to be made, it really does require improved talent, right? You need better researchers on your team to actually go through the steps of iterating and improving these models. And that's very expensive. We already know that Meta has spent millions of dollars in pay packages to recruit some of the best AI research talent in the world, and they even spent $1 billion on Scale, well, the Scale founder a few months ago to get them onto the team. And it's very interesting with that, or at least funny because those tests that Scale AI are so good at creating to actually rank and measure the quality of a model is what they're kind of considering and finding that, hey, once we really measured how good our models are, we're seeing that, hey, this model is not better than that model. So they purchased a scanner to let them know that they weren't doing enough. And so they are going to need to spend a lot more money to make sure that they are uh, getting where they want to get to in that space. A difference between Meta's models and the other competitors in the space is that they have been primarily releasing their models open source. So that means the weights. My bad, builders. We definitely have had some technical difficulties. We will definitely improve in the future to make sure things like this don't happen again. But today, gotta bear with us. But I'll just jump into the next story. Kind of lost it. Number two. But Kraken has become the first crypto exchange to gain access to the Federal Reserve's core payment system. And this is such an interesting development because crypto has spent years operating on the fringe of the financial system and the fringe of the society. Most people, when they think about crypto, or at least the chatter originally when Bitcoin was first released, and even these other competitor networks, was that we're creating Bitcoin to have a decentralized way of doing payments. We're trying to move out of the traditional banking sector. We're trying to move away from the government and all of the issues that people see with, having their money being owned by the government, inflation, all of these things. Trying to move away from those to go to crypto, which was the utopian tool for how we should move forward as a society with free, open payments. We've kind of gone a full 180 in the other direction at this point because today, most of the gains made from a value perspective inside of Bitcoin and even Ethereum is based on the fact that these different uh, companies like BlackRock, they have created ETF. They've started buying Bitcoin. They started buying Ethereum. They have made it more popular and acceptable to start using this technology. And even today, we're going to see that one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world globally is going to be operating under the jurisdiction of the US government, which is something that we haven't really seen directly, although it has been in the works over the last couple of years, because they really could not operate unless they were operating under the laws of the land. But it's very interesting. Traditionally, these crypto exchanges had to rely on banks to provide the final settlement and to actually offload the Bitcoin value into the fiat money system, right? So if, let's say, Kraken has an account at JP Morgan and Chase, and so does Joe Frazier. Joe Frazier also has an account on Kraken. And so whenever Joe Frazier wants to get money onto Kraken, he has to send a transfer from his account to Kraken's account inside of JP Morgan and Chase. And then Kraken will debit in his Kraken account however much Bitcoin he was supposed to get at that time. And in order to give Mr. Frazier back his US dollars, they would have to make that transfer themselves again from their JP Morgan account back to his Frazier account, but all within that existing banking service. They required the banks to actually provide this. Today, they can bypass, or I want to say necessarily bypassing the bank specifically, but now they're going direct to producer. They're going to make the transfer not from within a specific bank. They're going to be making that transfer through the federal SWIFT system to make that transfer. So now both of the master accounts that Kraken has with the Fed and JP Morgan has with the Fed are going to make the transfer directly there. So it makes it so that a lot of the fees that they were paying kind of go away. They no longer have to check in with Chase. They no longer have to check in with these big banks to make sure that they had that partnership and that account available. They really going straight to the guy himself and saying, "Look, I got this much value here on my account. Can I get right with you?" It's a very interesting development there, but philosophically, this is almost a complete 180 from where we were 10 years ago with the decentralization of currency and monetary policy. And this is a great thing for the US because now that Kraken does have to operate within US laws, they're able to uh, kind of send, well, and Kraken has users all across the globe that have accounts with them. They're now able to uh, really just send US dollars across the globe more quickly without having to rely on a traditional banking network. Now they can go directly through these exchange platforms and make US dollars available to people in Ghana, in Australia, whatever, without them having to have any type of footprint in their normal banks. So it is making the influence of the U.S. government and the U.S. dollar much stronger as an asset, but it also results in there being less openness and privacy that you would expect from a traditional Bitcoin network. Today, if you want to operate inside of the US, we have regulations like KYC and other privacy requirements and laws that you have to sometimes comply with. If the government wants to know where a transaction came from to make sure there was no money laundering involved or any type of fraud, they have to be able to provide that evidence to the government, to those investigators when the time comes, when and if the time comes. But it also makes it possible for those same regulators to be able to freeze accounts. Now, this is important because if you're not owning your wallet, if you don't, the phrase, not your keys, not your coins, these exchanges have the keys, they own the keys. And you and I, if we're using those exchanges, we are just giving them the money so that they can buy the Bitcoin or the crypto on our behalf. So they can own the asset on our behalf using their wallet. But the underlying asset is with them. And we just have we have some access to it and some ownership to it because, you know, they operate inside the US and they have to comply with some of their operating agreements, right? But it's not like a hard requirement that you can actually pull your value out anytime you want. You still have to operate within their terms of service. So it's very interesting. It's converting. crypto into almost a digital dollar today. And back when, and so I do want to also just highlight, and I'm kind of going through it right now because I'm not sure what part of my explanation was heard previously when my mic went out. But I do want to highlight kind of what that system looks like today. And I'll even highlight what it was and where it is now. So in the past, the entire American fiat money currency or money system is inside of the Federal Reserve Bank. Every commercial institution, commercial bank, I think even the US government, has an account with the Fed. Those accounts they create dollars. They decide whether or not a dollar exists. And now the US government can always go to the Fed and say, hey, we need more money. And so the Fed will put more money into the US government's account. And they can then spend that money wherever they want to spend it. And it will circulate through the economy. Banks had that same access without having to they couldn't just print money in the same way, but they had the ability to loan out more money than what they had available in their deposit, basically. And so, and that is the entire fractional reserve system in itself. They could loan, if they had $100 inside of the Fed to their name, they could then say to the Fed, I'm going to, or in at least in their ledgers, the bank ledgers, they could then loan out $180. Maybe not 180. They would have a debit in the depositor's account saying $100, and then they could lend out $80 to someone else. So basically, they created $80 worth of nothing, like of money, quote unquote, out of thin air, just by having an account open. And crypto exchanges had to operate within that system in order for them to, offboard, onboard the money that their users were transferring. Today, Kraken is now the bank. They no longer need a bank to provide that debiting to them. They can do it directly themselves. And I did see that they are still required to keep 100% of the deposits available, right? So if they get $100 in deposits, they can't lend out more than $100. But that's only a requirement today. I wonder when we get to the point where they start basically being able to lend out or keep reserves of less than what they currently have. I'm sure it'll come eventually. Uh, but this doesn't change kind of that relationship that banks, now Kraken is also one, has with the Federal Reserve. It also doesn't change the relationship that these exchanges have with the blockchain networks, right? Blockchain is still a decentralized ledger. The blocks that get minted to the chain, those still operate independently and globally, and there's still the same level of privacy and openness that existed since they started. But now, from a user perspective, we have more people able to access, or maybe more people able to access the system. The Kraken is now able to access the system more directly. Yeah, it's a hard. I'll say it's not super hard to understand, but basically much of this hasn't changed, but it does put a little bit more government authority over a platform that most people rallied for to be decentralized. and it really relies on the fact that you still can't pay debts inside of the US. You can't, like, the federal government has not made crypto a legal tender. So no one has to accept it. So you still have to have some type of way to get fiat currency, even if you do accept mostly Bitcoin from your customers for your products and services. So it's really just a way, an easier way, maybe even a cheaper way to provide that off ramp to users who are more comfortable with blockchain. And settlement definitely goes a lot quicker because you no longer have to go through, the bank to the Fed. Now y'all both go to the Fed directly. And it's one less layer of transactions that need to be settled before an actual payment goes through. Well, it's an interesting case. I'm definitely gonna talk some more about it in the future. Uh, Today kind of got thrown off. But if you're interested in the conversation and you like what you're hearing, like and subscribe, comment down below. Let me know what your take is on crypto and this new development. Do you think that Kraken having access to the Fed, what does that mean for Bitcoin? What does that mean for privacy? Do you see some do you see the people that only wanted Bitcoin to have that private way of transactions? Do you see them going and shifting to some other coin or network? And does that mean that Coinbase will soon become or soon get a similar contract like Kraken? And I wonder why it was even Kraken first. I know they are the largest crypto exchange, but in the US I think Coinbase today is the most popular. But I'd have to do some fact checking for that. But definitely worth keeping in mind. Let me know what you think, and we will definitely monitor what is going on in the world because there's a lot going on, y'all. Let's jump into the question.
Why do you need to love what you do?
So, loving the work gives you the energy to keep doing it even when things get hard. Honestly, the best people that I've worked with were excited to get to work. They were excited to talk about technology, talk about the architecture, and talk about the tools that they were using in their day. And when you're doing something difficult, when you're working on problems that take a lot of your energy, you want to be able to know that you love doing it. You want to have something that excites you in the morning to continue drilling away at that problem. Because if you're not excited about what you're doing, if you don't love it, you're going to get very tired and very burnt out more quickly. And it's something that I promise you, you can hear it from the people that the like the work. When you only come for the outcome, when you only want the money or the status of the title, but not the process, not the actual art of the craft that you're doing, then the daily friction, whatever the problems are, the extra meetings, the bugs in production, the customer service, all of that just becomes exhausting. And start, you won't be able to last over a 20 to 40-year period doing that. So think about any high level skill and anything that you want to do for a long time as being something that you have to love it, because you also need to deliberately practice for thousands of hours, right? We've all heard the 10,000 hour rule. Like, you won't be a master at anything until you have done it for at least 10,000 hours. When we're talking about coding and engineering, you have to be going and doing side projects. You have to be watching Software Sundays. You have to be talking to people about technology and building and trying out and experimenting with new tools. If you're not doing that, you're not really going to get the edge that you need in order to compete in the ups and downs of the market, right? There are going to be times where you get laid off. There are going to be times where the projects you get on are just super difficult. And having that love will keep you locked in even when it's really difficult to do so. And I would even say to that you want, like I always tell people, don't necessarily go do things like don't go to school study art just because you love to do art. I do kind of challenge everyone to at least look into software engineering and computer science and see what aspect of that does align with the things that they love. Do they love talking about history? Do they love to have conversations with people? Do they love to solve problems? There's other things that you can love that can kind of connect very well to technology in the industry. And so I don't want to say that you have to love every aspect of coding. You may not love typing, but you love to build things. You love to be creative and solve problems and maybe even write diagrams. That's something that you can love. And if you like to draw, get real creative about it and build those inside of technology, inside of software architecture. Like, I don't mean that you need to think that every day is fun in order to love the thing that you're doing, but you should love it enough that some part of the work gives you energy at least most of the time. And if that's true, you'll stay in the game long enough to get the value that you need to get out of it. And once you love something, it'll also improve the quality of the things that you build. Like when you're passionate about, optimizing this specific system, when you're passionate about making sure that your customers are getting the best outcome from the services you are providing, then you work a little harder to make sure everything is the way it is supposed to be. And that type of uh, professionalism is something that you really can't fake. And it becomes more valuable, especially when we got a bunch of people coming into the industry and not really caring about what they're doing. They're just coming in because they heard there was money out here. But the ones that really get the most money came in here because they loved talking to computer. They loved being at the keyboard. They loved seeing code run, and they loved debugging. I would say, you do have to love debugging, or at least love the feeling that you get when you finally solve a problem that has been bugging you for days, hours, or weeks. Because we've all been there. Your code is not going to run the first time. It's going to be a problem, and so you gotta love that practice and that activity, or else it won't work.
When is it important to walk away from an opportunity?
So early in your career, you should be optimizing for skills and exposure. So if you're going into a job and you're finding that they're moving you away from the thing that you want to do, if they're not letting you code real systems, if they're not letting you work with technologies that you want to focus on, then you may have to pivot away from there. Because the only thing that'll happen if you stay is that they'll slow down your career and they'll move you from from the trajectory that you had in mind when you got there. You have to make sure you're not focusing too much on the compensation or the titles when you're really trying to get enough experience in the thing that you want to do that you can actually build a long-term career from that. If you start practicing with a technology that is not going to be around for a long time and you're just starting in your career, then when that technology does go away, you have no experience to kind of fall back on to say, I want to start doing this new thing with this new technology. So you have to have some opportunities to play around with the things that really are aligning with your future. But you should also walk away from an opportunity when the outcome or the expected expectations are unclear. If you're seeing that you're working on a team and the objectives are constantly shifting, if no one knows what done is, or if no one understands what good really means, and they're trying to get you to do something right or do something well, then you should get out of there. Because at that point, you are getting a bunch of red flags. And if the organization is not able to decide what is important to them, then they're going to be looking to you to organize chaos. And at that point, you are playing a game that's not even worth playing, and it's going to lead to burnout eventually. So remove yourself as quickly as possible. But also, if you see that an opportunity requires you to do to you know use unsustainable effort, meaning you're required to work to midnight every day and work, get started early. You're expected to work weekends and holidays, or you're unable to put in boundaries for your availability, where you can't have a life outside of the job, then you should get out of there also expeditiously. You should make sure that you don't allow them to have that type of hold on you, because it's not going to work for you over the long term. If you cannot do the job for the length of time that is required for you to do it, then you're wasting your time to even start looking into it. If you're not someone that can work nights and weekends because you have a child, or that you just like to sleep, or you like to go outside and touch grass, going for an opportunity where they're saying, where the culture like directly goes against your culture and your values, it's not going to work for the long term. So you should be able to say no to that opportunity. But in total, you have to be able to walk away when things don't align with who you are and what you want. And especially walk away if the organization you're going to starts testing your integrity. If you start seeing things that kind of indicate that there's a lack of trust, a lack of honesty, and a lack of care in the way that people are doing things around you, then you have to extract yourself from there quickly. Because the only thing that will happen when you work with people that don't care about how they're working is that you end up getting dirty with them. Like whenever something really bad happens because of corners that were cut, you're going to be blamed also. You're going to be a person that they say, "Hey, weren't you with them when this was all happening?" And there's almost no way to explain that. You can't just say, "Oh, it wasn't me," but we got your name on the record saying you was a part of that. So, and I understand it is sometimes more difficult to walk away, especially when you have other responsibilities. But for developers, I would say make sure you have some type of foundation in place. You have some type of uh, you know emergency fund, and you have some options available to you at all times, so that if you do decide that it is better for you to walk away from an opportunity, you're not walking away into you know stress and into another chaotic experience inside of your own life. So make sure you're practicing and nurturing your interview skills, even if you love the job that you're at. Make sure you are still building relationships with people. Make sure that your network is still very strong and lively, because you might always need to tap somebody to say, "Hey, where I'm at is not the best for me." Make sure you have those people to tap into and call on if and when that time comes.
How does learning basic programming change the way you think about solving everyday problems?
So, learning basic programming allows you to approach problems by breaking them down from more complex ideas and into manageable systems. And then you have the understanding and the experience to say, I can solve these sub problems more easily than I could this large, big problem, right? If you start realizing that your mornings are chaotic and that your health is starting to, deteriorate, you can say, I need to fix my health. But you may have an easier time breaking down, and my health is really the amount of sleep that I get, the amount of food and the quality of the food that I get, the amount of water I drink, the amount of sleep, the amount of sunlight that I get. You start looking at it from not just me trying to fix my health to I need to do these other things to actually solve the problem that I'm trying to get to solving. And that becomes a much easier function to solve for, a much easier problem to solve for. So that's one benefit. Then when you learn programming, you start shifting from thinking emotionally about things and consequences to thinking about things strategically and understanding that there is a process. Now you start planning ahead because you understand that every step is going to require some other resources or some other variable. You start understanding that there's a cause and effects to the events in your life and the things that connect to it. You start thinking about sequences. Does it matter that I do this first versus this first? Does that order matter, or does it, or can I just do any of them and it'll all work out in at some point? And then you start thinking about what type of resources do I have available? Do I have people in my life to help me, manage some of this problem? Do I have tools available that can help manage this problem? Are there already solutions to this problem that I can just pull in to solve this problem and avoid having to, figure it out from scratch? You start really debugging how your life works because you understand that every problem is really just it just requires a series of steps in order to solve. And then you'll also get the benefit of seeing the world and the society that we live in as a complex system versus just the world, right? You start seeing that there are social impacts, economic impacts, and even environmental impacts to things that are done daily. You start understanding that there's a cause and effect to what happens to a person or society in one region and how it affects the environment or the economy in another region altogether. You start understanding how your role in life and how your responsibilities and the things that you're doing plays inside of that system. And you stop seeing problems as isolated. You start understanding that people are doing things without understanding that the things that they do have consequences, and those consequences can expand very quickly to other domains that they never kind of expected them to enter. And one of the best things that you learn from understanding programming is that perfection is not the goal. The goal is to iterate. The goal is to keep doing a little bit every day because the first thing you build is never going to be the best thing you build. You get better over time until what you start looking at is the best that you've ever done. If you look at any product or company, what you see today is not how they started. They started ugly, they started dirty, they started disorganized, they started small, they started scrappy. But over time they continue to build, they continue to invest into the problem that they were solving until they eventually polish the solution so much that all you see is the perfection in front of you. You have to be able to understand that that's not how the world works. Everything starts from something small and becomes the bigger thing in front of you, good or bad. And that is something that you may not understand in every domain of life, but you definitely understand when you're learning to write code and build systems because you can literally build a complex system over time and release it incrementally. And then in your day to day life, you start standardizing workflows. You start understanding how to automate processes so that you can eliminate unnecessary energy or use unnecessary waste of energy. You start thinking about what can I do differently inside of this process in my life to avoid, you know, wasting this 10 minutes of time that I'm wasting on this. What can I do to avoid doing the same thing twice when I don't need to touch this thing twice if I just did it this separate way? You start being able to move things around and compose them differently because you understand that there's just very small problems that require you to think about them in a more diverse way. So I honestly believe that whether you are interested in becoming a software developer or not, it is never a bad thing to understand how to solve problems the way a developer has been trained to solve problems. It's only going to be in your benefit to learn these skills.
Should I accept projects that use tools I'm unfamiliar with?
So I would say yes, but only if you can realistically close that knowledge gap in enough time to actually positively impact the project, right? You don't want to spend, if this is a mission critical project, you don't want to spend the entire time available learning how to get on board. You want to make sure you are comfortable with something inside of that project so that you can start providing value as quickly as needed. So, one of the major things that you need to do before you start is be very transparent with the client or the stakeholders about where your skills and expertise lie. Let them understand what is the gap and make sure they understand that this is the gap and this is how long it'll take for me to close that gap, and make sure that they're comfortable with that. Make sure that they understand that that you need some type of time before you're going to get up to speed. And I would say, since graduating from university, for me, I've started to think about most projects, almost every job, as really just a paid learning opportunity. Every time I go into a new project, there are things that I don't understand. There are workplace peculiarities. There are technologies that are foreign to me. But if I waited or stayed in college to learn everything that I was going to see in the real world, then I would never have gotten out of college. I would have stayed there learning and iterating on things that I would never really get the chance to practice on. So I would never really get that hands-on experience that I needed. And so I would waste years and probably millions of dollars doing something that I could just go out into the world to actually learn. So if you think you understand at least 70% of the problem that you need to solve, whether that's in the domain or the technology or even the business that you're going into, then go for it. Make sure you're clear on the expectations and clear on what you can do today, but you'll figure out how to close that gap, especially if you are interested in being there. You have some love for the game and you want to be doing it. Now, if you find that there's a project that you're going into and you don't know 70% of what is being spoken about, if the gap is 70%, then I would avoid going for that. I would make sure that I spend some more time learning about that domain or learning about that technology before I jump into it. Because that much unknown is going to cause stress if you are under a time crunch, or especially if you're under a time crunch, but it's also going to require you to stretch yourself beyond what you may be capable of stretching yourself today. You may not be able to close the gap very easily based on your current level of knowledge and your current level of information. And at that point, you're just gambling with your client and yourself, your own reputation, and that's not good business. So remember that taking projects with unfamiliar tools is really the fastest way to grow as an engineer. But if you do so too recklessly, then you're really just going to damage trust. And that's really all you have in your career. And that's all you can really rely on over the time. So don't do that. Don't mess that up.
What is the Center for Internet Security?
So the Center for Internet Security, or CIS, is a nonprofit organization that develops standards and releases materials for governments and other institutions to understand cybersecurity best practices and understand how to protect their organizations and their systems and their data. They are a widely respected group that is looked at by companies, enterprises, governments, and security professionals all across the world. They release best practices or controls, benchmarks, and even hardened images for a number of different technologies that help all of these different parties, enterprises, governments, and security professionals to build very early cybersecurity programs if they needed to, without going so deep into NIST or other ISO regulatory standards. They focus on best practices that you need to, like, bare minimum. They focus on making sure you have MFA in place for root accounts. They make sure you have S3 buckets or S3 resources uh, protected and private versus keeping them public. They make sure that different configurations that are possible on a Kubernetes cluster or a S3 resource or a EC2 instance. They make sure you understand how to secure those to at least give a best effort level of security to your customers and users. And it's really the bare minimum of what you need to do as a professional to secure the systems that you are working under. And they almost make it impossible. Like, there's no excuse not to implement some of the controls and the uh, benchmarks that they provide for lack of knowing. Because you don't need to know. You need to just follow what they're saying. But I've mentioned it before. There are some requirements that really just don't jive well with your specific system. But if you don't even understand what those requirements are, and you haven't at least documented why you require an exception, then you haven't done enough due diligence on your part to make that make sense. So if you think of OWASP as the organization that tells developers how to secure web applications, think about CIS as the group that tells infrastructure team, IT, the security ops, DevSecOps, how to configure systems, infrastructure, so that attackers cannot so easily attack them. So it's definitely worth looking into CIS and their standards and controls, especially if you're in a startup. Maybe not MVP phase, but definitely after product market fit. If you want to make sure you are doing your best to protect your customers and the long term success of your organization, look into how to implement a lot of these controls because they can only benefit you if you use them. And so that's all we had this week for questions. If you have any more, if there's something I did not clarify well, please put it inside of the chat. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what stood out to you from your own perspective and where the gaps are. Because we want to make sure that we're thinking professionally. It's no longer just about being a coder. You don't want to just know how to code. Computers can code. Now we have to understand, how do I make sure that my code operates as it's supposed to inside of the real world? And in the real world, there are risks. And in the real world, there are problems. And so understanding these topics will help you do better to solve those problems and even avoid them for the most part. And before we got here, I do want to just talk about taking breaks. And again, I'm going on my break in the next 2 weeks, but I know a lot of people think about rest as a luxury. I know we've got especially in New York and in this area, we have a very strong hustle culture, and that's good in some seasons of life. But when we're living in a world that's so flooded with things going on and so flooded with signals, it is a requirement to get out, to disconnect from that, to allow your mind and your energy to just clean itself. So having a break gives you space to, you know, especially without interruption, it gives you a space to reflect on what's going well and understand where you're, may not be doing what you need to do, as well as being able to separate the signal from the noise. So much noise, you're not understanding what you need to do with it. So you have to be able to pause so you can make better decisions and see what is working more clearly, especially when it relates to the vision that you're trying to build. You have to remember that your brain cannot process endless floods of just inputs. At some point, the social media uh, sh- feeds, the requests from your people at work and your clients, the day-to-day challenges that you get from commuting to work to your normal chores and whatever you have to do at your house. A lot of that over time starts weakening your ability to actually think critically, and you start reacting more emotionally and not being able to pivot the way you're supposed to. So you got to be able at some point to step back, step away, and just figure out yourself, lean into yourself and listen to yourself in a silent place. So that's where I am doing. That's where I'm going. That's what I'm doing. Um, I'm disconnecting so I can avoid making some of the simple mistakes that are starting to pop up. I want to rest so I can improve my performance. We have a lot to build in the next 12 months, but definitely over the next 50 years. So I want to make sure that I am giving myself the best uh the best infrastructure, the best foundation to build the right things, the best things in the best way. So that's not just learning quickly, that's not just learning enough. That's being able to think with the right judgment. That's being able to recognize patterns and be creative and strategic. And so this pause is going to allow me to do that in the best way possible because I want to come back focused, and I will come back focused. I will come back more aggressive and more disciplined in everything that I'm doing because again, we just getting started. We continuously building and getting better over time, but this is what I need. So I will see y'all in a few weeks. Peace out. It was great to have you back this week, and it was good to meet you if you was new. Builders, stay up.